Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We are on ayah number 170 of Surah Al-Baqarah. Let us continue. قال الله تعالى: وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمُ اتَّبِعُوا مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ قَالُوا بَلْ نَتَّبِعُ مَا أَلْفَيْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا أَوَلَوْ كَانَ آبَاؤُهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ. So the key words here, when he says lahum, to them, it means when it is said to the kuffar. Ittabi'u, follow what Allah has sent down, meaning the Quran and the general guidance on the tongue of the Prophet. They say, no, we will follow what we alfayna, from the verb alfa yulfi, we found or came across our forefathers doing. He says, أَوَلَوْ كَانُوا, even if they were, لَا يَعْقِلُونَ شَيْئًا, did not understand anything, meaning anything of guidance. Otherwise, there were many things that they understood. They understood how to carry out trade and so on. But guidance is what is referred to here. وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ, and they were not guided. Now this is in question form, but it's a rhetorical question. So reflecting on this ayah, we may take that this ayah applies to most of mankind, past, present and future. It is one of the most powerful forces amongst humans, the force to follow what your forefathers have been following. And this is one of the primary hurdles that people fail at when it comes to the matter of being guided. They are simply following their forefathers, and they are happy to do so. But the answer that the Quran gives is that you need to be pursuing the truth and the guidance rather than pursuing your forefathers. Because it says that their forefathers did not understand anything of guidance, and neither were they guided. So then how does it make sense to follow them? And it also goes to show us that these people are not really pursuing the truth. So how can they possibly be guided? What they are pursuing is just to fit in with their environment, with their family and so on. And actually we can also make an analogy between this ayah and those people who blindly follow their madhab even when the evidence is stacked against that particular opinion. We may also take that anyone who opposes the guidance of al-Islam does not have al-aql, and this is the aqlul irshad, and also that such a person is not muhtad, meaning guided. In any case, the most important point is that this ayah applies to most of mankind. Let's take ayah 171. وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا كَمَثَلِ الَّذِي يَنْعِقُ بِمَا لَا يَسْمَعُ إِلَّا دُعَاءً وَنِدَاءً صُمٌّ بُكْمٌ عُمْيٌ فَهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. He says وَمَثَلْ, meaning the likeness or the similitude, or you could say the description of the kuffar is like the likeness of the one who يَنْعِق, meaning shouts or calls out. So this would be the shepherd who shouts or calls out to his flock. So these animals only hear a sound. They are not able to understand the shepherd because they of course do not understand human language, but they can still hear some words. He says they only hear dua and nida. So dua is when somebody calls you specifically and personally, and nida is just a general call, not for you specifically, but just for everyone generally. So this is how we would differentiate between the two words, dua and nida. Now, there are two ways of understanding this analogy. The first way is that the shepherd is like the Prophet, calling them, and these kuffar are like the animals, who only hear a voice, but they do not understand the call, the language. And so when you call the kuffar to the deen, they will certainly hear you say something, but they will not truly understand what it is that you are calling them to, the actual guidance. It will simply go in through one ear and out the other. This is the first interpretation. The second interpretation is that the caller, or the shepherd, is their forefathers, calling them to their religion, to their way. And these people hear the call and they answer, just like the animal answers the call of the shepherd when he calls the animals, they do respond, but they do not understand what the words actually mean because they do not understand human language. So in other words, these animals are responding to the call, but they do not really understand what it is that they're responding to. And so likewise then with the kuffar, they just respond to the call of their forefathers in obeying their religion and their lifestyle, but they do not really comprehend and internalize what it is that they are answering. They truly do not understand that this is all misguidance. So these are two interpretations, and really both of these interpretations are correct. Then he says summun, this is the plural of asam, meaning deaf. Bukmun, plural of abkam, meaning mute, unable to speak. And we have umyun, plural of a'ma, meaning blind. But this means to say that they do not hear the truth, and they do not speak the truth, and they do not see the truth. So what good are their faculties when it does not guide them? Then he says, fahum, so then they, la ya'qilun, do not have aql, do not understand, meaning do not understand the truth. So the fa is sababiyya. So because they are summun, bukmun, umyun, therefore this leads them to not understanding the truth and the guidance. So reflecting on this ayah, we learn of this analogy being made, and like we said, it could be understood in both ways, and both ways are acceptable. We learn that if your faculty of speech, of hearing, of sight, and of intelligence does not lead you to embracing the guidance, then it is as if you do not have those faculties in the first place. This is the standard that Allah Jalla wa Ala sets. He does not set the mere biological standards by which people understand these faculties. No, the standard of Allah is different, so understand this. Another type of people that could come under this analogy are nationalists, people who are proud of their country, so that they owe their allegiance, their love to the country rather than to Allah Jalla wa Ala. This is also from the umbrella of following your forefathers. Nationalism is a massive problem today. It is one of the great barriers preventing people from embracing Islam. Now let us take ayah number 172. Allah Jalla wa Ala turns His attention to us, those who have Iman, saying, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum, washkuru lillahi in kuntum iyyahu ta'budun. So this Ya ayyuha is the harf of nida, calling out someone. You could say Ya ayyuha, or you could just say ayyuha. Both have the same meaning. And when he calls out using the description of Iman, it means that whatever will follow next is a test of your Iman. The more Iman you have, the more you will follow the upcoming order, and the less, the less. He says, Kulu, fi'al amr, from akala ya'kulu, to eat. Min tayyibat, from the good things. We have spoken about tayyib before. Anything which is halal is tayyib. Now when he says min tayyibat, we say this min is li bayan al jins, to make plain the type of thing you can eat. So jins means the type or the category. So what type of thing can you eat from? From the tayyibat. So he says from the tayyibat of what? Razaqnakum, we have provided you. Razaqa yarzuqu, to provide. So ultimately all your provisions are from Allah Jalla wa Ala. Then he says washkuru, from the verb shakara yashkuru shukran, to give thanks. Giving thanks to Allah can be defined as obeying Allah Jalla wa Ala with your tongue, with your limbs, and with your heart. Linguistically, shukr or gratitude means showing your appreciation of the favors that have been given to you. So that is showing your appreciation to your benefactor. And of course this could be done in various ways, and it all depends on the context. But understand that thanking Allah can only be done in ways that Allah has legislated, because you can only use the currency that is accepted. If you go to any country in Europe, for example, you will not be able to use Indian rupees. because this is not a currency that is accepted in these countries. You have to use the proper currency. This is why we need the Quran and the Sunnah to know what the proper currency is. Otherwise, somebody may think that thanking Allah can be done by giving a thumbs up and pointing it towards the sky. So he says, وَاشْكُرُوا لِلَّهِ إِن كُنْتُمْ إِيَّاهُ تَعْبُدُونَ. If you to Him alone worship. We have spoken about ibadah before. So reflecting on this ayah, we may find that Iman is the best description for any human being. This is the description that Allah chooses to call out to His chosen people. They say this description, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, occurs 28 times in the Quran. We take from this ayah that only the tayyibat are to be eaten, because this is what Allah orders us to eat from, not from the khaba'ith, which is the opposite of tayyibat, the impure things or the haram things. And the tayyibat is that which is halal in and of itself, such as fish and milk and bread and eggs and so on. But it is also halal in how it is earned. So when you purchase your food, you purchase it with halal earning. You do not purchase it with haram earning made from selling illegal drugs and so on. And of course the evidence for that is the famous hadith about the man on a journey calls out to Allah Jalla wa Ala raising his hands, but the Prophet said that his food is haram, his drink is haram, his clothing is haram. How can his dua therefore be answered? In a particular narration, the Prophet ﷺ said, أَيُّمَا عَبْدٍ نَبَتَ لَحْمُهُ مِنْ سُحْتٍ فَالنَّارُ أَوْلَى بِهِ. Whoever has his flesh grown from suht, then the fire has most right to it. Suht means haram earning. And a big lesson to come out of this ayah is the importance of shukr. And notice how he links it to ibadah, because thanking Allah Jalla wa Ala is ibadah. Every act of thanks is an ibadah, and every act of ibadah is an act of thanks. And so Al-Islam is all about giving Allah Jalla wa Ala His due gratitude. Nowadays you find people, they are giving gratitude to other humans, and they are forgetting all about their greatest benefactor, who is Allah Jalla wa Ala. So it is our job to direct their gratitude towards Allah Jalla wa Ala first and foremost, then to other people. And this theme of gratitude is a recurring theme in the Quran. It comes up much. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا لُقْمَانَ الْحِكْمَةَ أَنِ اشْكُرْ لِلَّهِ. Indeed, we gave Luqman the wisdom, the hikmah, to thank Allah. So it means that thanking Allah is from hikmah, as it is from ibadah. And you would do well to collect all those ayat in the Quran which speak of giving thanks to Allah Jalla wa Ala. Being ungrateful is simply the ugliest thing in the world. Let's look at ayah 173. إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةَ وَالدَّمَ وَلَحْمَ الْخِنْزِيرِ وَمَا أُهِلَّ بِهِ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. إِنَّمَا حرف الحصر, meaning only. So he only makes haram for you. حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ الْمَيْتَةَ. This means any animal who has died without being slaughtered properly in the Islamic fashion. And this of course applies to those animals who can be slaughtered. It does not apply to those animals who do not have a flowing blood, such as locusts, because they are not slaughtered and they can be eaten even as dead meat. Similarly, fish as well. If they died through a natural cause, they can be eaten. The dead of the sea are an exception. So we are talking about land animals with a flowing blood who are allowed to be slaughtered for meat, such as sheep. As for land animals with a flowing blood who are not allowed to be slaughtered for meat, such as a dog or a cat, then of course it makes no difference whether they die a natural cause or you slaughter them in an Islamic fashion, they can never be halal. Waddam, blood. This is the flowing blood which flows from the veins when you slaughter an animal. That flowing blood is najis. However, the blood which remains in the animal after you have slaughtered that animal is halal, because it's simply impossible to get rid of all of the blood from the animal. And so the blood which remains is overlooked. In Surah Al-An'am, more detail is given about the blood when it said, Daman masfuhan, flowing blood. So when it flows from the jugular vein when you cut it during the slaughter. And the lahm, meaning the flesh of the khinzir, that is the pig. So if he says the flesh of the pig is haram, does this mean that the skin and the bones are halal? Or do we say that this is kharaja makhraj al-ghalib? It came out from the most common exit, meaning he's talking about what most commonly happens. Otherwise the whole pig is haram. And we say the latter, the whole pig is haram. But it's the meat which is actually eaten. Nobody really eats the skin or the bones. وَمَا أُهِلَّ بِهِ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ. Now the verb uhilla is the passive form of the verb ahalla, yuhillu, which means to raise the voice. In the Hajj you make the ihlal with the talbiyah. What it refers to here is the voice which is raised in mentioning the false gods when they sacrifice the animal. And of course this was common amongst the Ahlul Jahiliyyah. So any animal who is slaughtered for some false god, then such an animal is not allowed to be eaten. When you slaughter an animal, you have to say Bismillah. You have to make mention the word of Allah. Otherwise, this meat is haram and it is treated as maita, dead meat. So these are 4 things which he has made haram, after he told us in the previous ayah to eat of the good things. However, he makes a certain exception. In a case of necessity, you can eat the haram. فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ, from darar, meaning harm. So whoever is harmed, meaning in a case of necessity, so that is, you are about to die, or maybe some other grievous bodily harm. غَيْرَ بَاغٍ, from bagha yabghi, to desire. So not desiring it, meaning not loving it, knowing that this is haram and that you're only eating it out of necessity, but you do not love to eat it. You are not desirous of it. Much like how a person might take a bitter medicine. He does not love this medicine. He does not desire this medicine. If he had a choice, he would not take this medicine, but he knows he has no choice. Essentially, he must take the medicine. وَلَا عَادٍ, from عَدَى يَعْدُ, to overstep the limit. So this is to say, he does not eat of this haram meat or haram food any more than he has to. So it's just to keep himself alive, just that much. فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ, and there is no sin on him. إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Notice his 2 names, they are appropriate, because such a person who eats the haram in a case of necessity will be forgiven. If Allah had said, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ, then this would give the idea that Allah will punish those who eat the haram even in a necessity. Or for example, if he were to say, Inna Allah Azizun Hakim, or Inna Allah Sami'un Alim, these names are normally given as a threat. But Ghafurur Rahim is not a threat. It is one of clemency. There is another tafsir of the word ad. They say he does not obtain the food by illegal or haram means, such as, for example, robbing people and stripping them of their possessions, and generally being a highwayman. So this is another tafsir, and they're both valid. So reflecting on this ayah, what can we take? Well, we can take these 4 things mentioned are haram. Are these the only haram things mentioned? Well, no. There are other things also which are haram, but these are 4 of the things which are haram. For example, the Quran does not mention donkey meat being haram, yet we know from the hadith that it is. Also, predatory animals and birds are haram to be eaten, but they are not mentioned anywhere in the Quran. So the harf al-hasr innama is not intended in and of itself, as indeed there are many other things which are haram. We pick up the vital lesson that the haram can be consumed in a case of necessity. However, you need to be sure that it is in fact a case of necessity and not just your imagination or some wasawis telling you it's necessity. So you have to fear Allah in this regard, and that this particular item will indeed remove the necessity. For example, if you're thirsty and about to die out of thirst, can you drink alcohol? The answer is no, because this will not remove your necessity. Alcohol dehydrates you, so you'll actually die quicker. As opposed to, let's say you have something blocking your throat and you're about to die out of being choked, and the only thing you have available at that particular time is an alcoholic beverage. Now here, you can drink the alcohol, because this is not of thirst, this is to push down that food item which is choking you. So notice the difference. And of course the other two conditions, غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ, are mentioned in the ayah. So these are 4 conditions in total. If you are on a journey, let's say, and you have to eat from someone else's food, then you need to ask them permission first. If there is no one there to seek permission from, then in a case of necessity you can eat from the tree, let's say if there's a fruit tree, but you eat it right there. You are not allowed to take anything of it with you. Authentically in Sunan Ibn Majah, we have a narration where one of the companions, Ubbad ibn Sharahbil radiallahu anh, did just that. He took from the fruits of someone else's tree because he was hungry, he needed to eat. And he took some fruits in his clothes. And the owner found out. He beat Ubbad and took his clothes. So Ubbad ibn Sharahbil complained to the Prophet, and the Prophet rebuked the owner of the tree, telling him, مَا أَطْعَمْتَهُ إِذْ كَانَ جَائِعًا أَوْ سَاخِبًا وَمَا عَلَّمْتَهُ إِذْ كَانَ جَاهِلًا. You did not feed him when he was hungry, and you did not teach him when he was ignorant. Meaning to say, how is it that you're beating him when he was only eating because he was hungry? And the fact that he took some of the fruits away in his clothing was wrong, but he was ignorant. You should have taught him. And then the Prophet ordered that his clothes be returned, and he gave Ubbad ibn Sharahbil a whisk of food, or they said half a whisk of food, a whisk being 60 sa'. One of the tabi'in, Masruq, says that if somebody is hungry, then he is allowed to eat from the haram if he is going to die otherwise, and if he does not eat and he dies, then he will enter the fire. So he says this because he sees this act of not eating the haram as a suicide, which is of course a major sin. With regards to the haram food, such as let's say the dead meat, there are some scholars who said that in the case of darura, the dead meat turns from impure to pure, but this opinion does not seem apparent to us. Rather we say it remains impure, but it is halal to consume. We also learn from this ayah the 2 names of Allah, Ghafoor or Rahim. As for Ghafoor, it has the same root letters as Mighfar, which is a helmet, because a helmet protects the head from arrows and harmful things and covers it. So Ghufran is covering your sins and protecting you from their harmful effects, which of course is the punishment. Wallahu a'lam.